Oh, 6:15? Oh, sorry, I was told 6, so never mind, we have 15 minutes, so if you have questions, come on up to the microphone and...
No? Yeah, okay, there we go. My question is with regard to Biden's all-of-government approach to climate change and emission regulations. You noted different agency actions that were being proposed, one of which I think you said was a net zero by 2050 administered via the Energy Department. Now, we had something not even that stringent called Obama's Clean Power Plan. And in February of 2016, it was stayed by the Supreme Court on the presumption that it would be thrown out because Scalia had warned the administration that if you see some new interpretation in a long-standing law that affects a large number of people, we are going to look very closely at that. I think was pretty close of a quote as I can get. Isn't this going to invite simply the same court action, and there is a bigger majority that's going to vote against it than would have done so in 16?
No, I'm not sure if I can. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. They are, and I think they are inviting the sue and settle portion of things again because they're doing the exact same thing. WOTUS was one, but never re-implemented the way, and so they're going to redo and try undo that one the same way.
But this is the Department of Energy creating more stringent greenhouse gas regulations than were in the Clean Power Plan without a legislative action by the Congress. That's precisely what Scalia was complaining about. Mm-hmm. Don't you think that's going to happen?
All I can go by is what they have stated from their agency, what they're proposing, and whether they can get away with doing it or not. But the big thing is they're stating it in hopes that people will just be afraid and implement it. Just like with the Clean Power Plan, well, states started implementing their SIPs,
yeah,
right? And so they got their way, but they never had to do it. If they would have waited, they would have never had to have done a SIP. Those states would have never gotten locked into them because it all got turned away in the courts.
Okay.
So that's how they get it done. Why, this is what we're going to do, and they're going to scare people into trying to do it, and then the courts are going to say, you didn't have to do that. Well, the states are going to be too far down the road to step back.
One brief question for Steve. When you talked about reconciliation, yes, there is a 50-50 majority with the vice president breaking the tie. Howsoever, the guy in office doesn't seem to have his brights on, and it's getting kind of dimmer day by day by day. There may come a time in the not very distant future where he is going to have to step down. And that changes reconciliation dramatically because the Senate remains 50-50. It has to approve a nomination for a new vice president from a President Harris. And it's 50-50, and there's nobody to break a tie because there's no vice president.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. But, so I think what you might find, you recall that when Woodrow Wilson returned from Europe after Versailles, he had a stroke in the middle of his tour.
His wife ran the government.
And they kept him alive, and his wife started making the decisions. So I think they'll keep Biden alive so that situation doesn't occur.
Interesting.
And you saw Psycho, right? Is it Psycho? Yeah, where Bates Motel, yeah.
Okay.
Where the grandmother is at the end, right? You saw that, right?
Yeah. All right, thanks a lot.
My name is Carr Ingham. I'm an oil and gas economist from the great state of Texas. It's a little hard to have this discussion, it seems, without giving some consideration to Texas and its contribution to the energy mix. As of right now, we produce well over 40% of the nation's crude oil, up from 20% 10 years ago. 25-30% of the nation's natural gas. We don't have a lot of federal land, very little in the way of federal land. And so we're going to be more difficult to get to than other states. The pathways to that potentially are the land grab, Endangered Species, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, all of those sorts of things. State of Texas is getting increasingly irritated with the federal government about these things, and other things as well. But I'm not sure we're going to take this laying down, our elected officials. And even our regulators in Texas are Texans and are irritated by this as well. So less a question and just more maybe some feedback on a state like Texas' ability to potentially. I mean, listen, we'll sue the federal government every day. Our attorney general, I think, files about 5 lawsuits a day against the feds. But can the state push back? Now, of course, we even have our own grid, and it's largely for this purpose. Now, they've got their own problems, and we do, because we've kind of fallen prey to this notion that we need to, even at the state level, subsidize wind and solar, which is largely, at least in my view, what led to these problems that we had in February. Maybe we'll see the light on that one of these days, and maybe we won't, but I'm not sure we're going to give up control of the grid all that easily either. So maybe it's just wishful thinking on my part that the state of Texas is not going to take this laying down, but I don't think the state of Texas is going to take this laying down.
Well, I hope you don't, but I think to be perfectly frank, what happened in Texas in February was, that was a Republican and Democrat caused disaster, right? You agree? Yeah, of course. And so, and if you also look at the ongoing border crisis, the federal government has a lot of unaccountable power with what it does. And I would not sell it short on what it can do and what a court will let it do. I think that people who oppose what the Biden administration wants to do need to get a lot more activated than they are and put a lot more pressure on their representatives in Washington, who I think are just a little too passive for my taste on all this kind of stuff. And as far as and even with what's going on in the state, I mean, it's Republicans. Greg Abbott is as guilty as anybody else. Rick Perry, they're as guilty as anybody else for letting that happen. Right? It's their fault. They allowed themselves to be bought off by the wind industry. T. Boone Pickens got rid of all that coal for what? No benefit. More emissions than ever.
Well, I think for me, Texas doesn't need to stand alone. That's why I think that the coalitions need to be built from the states, and it comes from Alaska has the same fight Texas has. It's a little different, but it's the same thing. All the way then, North Dakota straight down the line. And each of us, especially us that run straight down the center of this country, we are the energy producers. We are the food producers, and if we all stand together, the surrounding states around us are going to stand with us as well. That's why we are supposed to be a united states, not a federally run organization. And that unity is the only way we're going to push back for our own states' rights, for our own individual rights, for our own prosperities, for our own liberties and freedoms. And that's where we have to start standing as united and not backing down. And I truly think that, I know my Attorney General has worked with yours and your governor back in the day many, many times. And I think that those types of things are going to have to continue. I'm not big into the lawsuit thing, but if we have to stand up for our rights. And if our attorney generals will do it, then we as citizens need to back them, and then we stand for our own rights as well.
Dave Stevenson with the Cesar Rodney Institute, and the first person approved for the EPA transition team under President Trump. Amy, I just had to do something there. So a question for Amy and a comment for Steve. Bette, you get a pass. Amy, so is Duke going to go with the nuclear option? Simple question.
Everything is fungible. But what is not in the legislation is a mandate for shutting down coal. That got taken out. So it was a 50-page bill that was stripped. The mandate to shut down coal is gone. That doesn't mean they can't do it. I mean, they'll make a case in front of what is North Carolina's PUC. But what is in there? So there's no mandate. There's no mandate to shut down coal, which they wanted. There's no mandate for solar and wind in there. What is in there is reliable and least cost. How they determine that, I mean, you know this as well as, I mean, we've been through these PUC wars before.
Right.
Will they do the nuclear option? You know, if they care about reliable power at the least expense while trying to, achieve the policy goal, then yes. But will they? Boy, that's a great question. All I know is it's not mandated in the new legislation. I mean, when I say it's not nuclear is not mandated, but neither is wind, nor solar, nor batteries, which we know are more expensive, and then stripped out the mandates on shutting down coal.
Okay. For both you and Steve, just a comment. I recently worked on the Dominion Power Utility Commission plan for the Virginia Clean Energy Act. And it's coincidentally almost the exact same numbers of percent of where they're going to get the power for 2030 as in this federal plan. And the Utility Commission came up with these numbers. It's they're saying it'll raise electric rates about 2/3. And I looked at some things they left out, and it's actually going to double the electric rates. And I've looked at a lot of utility plans, and for the commission to say that, it kind of gives more power to not doing this. So,
I take your point, but the thing that's frustrating to me about all this is that there's a lot more than pricing that is the problem with this. This really can't be done. You can't run a grid on wind and solar, right? I mean, just look at what's going on in Europe now. They had a little dip in wind this year, and they're in crisis now because they got rid of their coal plants. Now they have to buy gas to make up for the wind, and their economies are coming back, and so gas prices are going through the roof and causing an energy crisis, which is coming back to hit us. And so all this, there's a lot more than money. It's can it be done? What's going to happen to the grid? And it can't be done. You can look at the German grid on any given week, and if it wasn't for fossil fuels, Germany would have no electricity because the wind, the sun fails every day, and the wind fails often for more than a day. So we don't talk enough about that. We talk about costs a lot because people understand costs, but it's a California situation where we're going to have rolling blackouts, or Texas, where we just have utter failure at the worst time. And that's coming, nationwide if any of this stuff gets passed.
Anybody else? No? Okay. All right, well, now we're actually out of time. Sorry about that. Someone told me 6, and I thought it was 6, so my apologies. But anyway, yeah, so that's it for the panels for the day. Thank you very much for sticking through it. I know it's a long day, but so we got a cocktail reception coming up and then dinner, so, please make sure you stick around, go get some drinks in you, and kick back and relax.